My name is Ewan. I'm from the St Andrews Union Debating Society, and this video is going to be covering judging. So if you are a speaker or a judge at the upcoming Bogwell competition, this video is going to be useful to you. If you're a speaker, you are likely quite new to external university debate competitions. You might also be quite new to debating generally. So knowing how to judge is an incredibly useful tool that is going to help you throughout your career as a debater, and is also going to help you at Bogwell because you'll have the advantage that you know what judges are looking for in cases. You're going to be able to cater your speeches in a way that judges are going to be able to fully credit, and you're also going to avoid some of the common pitfalls that causes teams to lose out in debates because of technicalities of judging. And of course, if you're a judge, this is going to be covering all of the bases and all of the basic things you need to know about judging a British parliamentary debate. So throughout the 5 sections of this video, we're going to cover everything you need so you can feel confident about judging at Bogwell. So there are 3 types of judges in British parliamentary debate. Trainees and wings are collectively referred to as panellists, and a panelist judge is able to sit in on the debate. They form members of the panel. They will watch the debate, take notes. They will contribute to the panel discussion by offering their justifications and insights into the debate, and then are able to collectively come to the decision and the final call of the debate. The way that trainees and wings differ is that if the chair at the end of the panel discussion has to call a vote to decide the final call if we do not reach a consensus as a panel, trainees are unable to vote in any calls called by the chair, whereas wings do have a vote. So this is really the only difference between a trainee and a wing. They are both collectively panelists and have the same rights as a judge as any panelist has. The chair has a slightly different responsibility where during the debate they will be the one leading it, so they will be leading introductions, they will likely be the judge who will be doing timekeeping, and they will also be charged with keeping order during the debate. And then during the panel discussion, they will be leading the discussion, they will be guiding all of the panelists through all of the different calls and all of the different areas of contention to then have either reach the final call by consensus, or if they have to, they will call a vote. The chair has the casting vote, which means if after a vote is called, it ends in a tie, the chair is able to vote a second time to break that tie, and then finally they're also able to give the oral adjudication. We will look at oral adjudications and some instances where the chair might not give one, but for the vast majority of cases, the chair will be the one giving the oral adjudication. It's important to know what all of the different judge types do, because throughout your time at a competition, your judge type might change. So before every round, the CA team, the Chief Adjudication team at the competition, will set all of the rooms and they will set all of the panels in the rooms. So depending on what they need for a specific round, you may be a trainee, you may be a wing, you may be a chair. It all just depends on what the CA team needs. So looking at the actual rules of judging, judges in British parliamentary debates are generally referred to as the average intelligent voter. So this means that they have no specific or specialized knowledge. So the average intelligent voter who is a debate judge does not come from a certain country, they do not study a certain subject, they do not have a specific profession or political view or anything like that. They are willing to be persuaded in that they are able to be persuaded by robust analysis and impacts that come from teams. They are sometimes referred to as the globally informed voter, and this means that they understand the headlines of recent world news, but they may not know the details of specific cases in specific countries. So the average intelligent voter will know that North Korea is not a democracy, but they might not know the specific ins and outs of the government there. This comes back to having no specific or specialized knowledge. They are also able to logically follow complex topics if they are explained fully by teams. So if in economics round, a team wants to give an argument on quite a complex economic topic, it is up to the team to have to explain that fully in order for an average intelligent voter to understand it. it may be the case that the judge studies economics and understands what the team is saying. However, they need to put that specialized knowledge aside and think, if the average intelligent voter is listening to this, will they be able to follow it? That is the metric that is used to decide whether teams have what we call spec knowledge, where they are giving assertions and they are giving points that have not been backed up by logical explanations. Finally, the average intelligent voter does know the rules of British parliamentary debate, so the judge, as an average intelligent voter, still knows role requirements of each of the speakers. They understand how to judge a debate, and they work in all of the same metrics that everyone else in British parliamentary debating works. So judges in British parliamentary debating are also non-interventionist. So this means they are not inserting themselves into the debate personally to come to a call. So this means that they have to ultimately minimize their personal bias for certain cases and premises, and generally come into the debate having no preconceived ideas of how the debate is going to look and who is going to win. So the first thing a non-interventionist judge will do is they will not discredit arguments based on their headlines. So just because a team has called one of their arguments a freedom of speech argument does not mean it has to be discredited as irrelevant if they're able to develop their case into one that is logically sound, for example, and has good impacts. So all judges should allow time and allow the space for teams to develop their cases further than just their initial headlines or the initial impacts that are presented. Teams should be able to expand on these impacts further than just what they flag as being their impact or their argument. Judges also should not punish or, on the flip side, credit teams for the quote-unquote obvious arguments that they would have run. So this goes back to having no preconceived ideas. So judges do not go into the debate thinking what they would have done as a speaker, so they cannot punish teams for failing to say the obvious argument that they would have run, and they shouldn't overcredit teams just because they have said a case that the judge thinks is obvious or the correct case to run. On the flip side of that, judges also will not rebut teams' cases if a case is, in the judge's eyes, shaky or in any way able to be taken down by rebuttal. If the other teams in the debate do not do that rebuttal and do not take down the case, by the end of the debate, that will still be a standing argument. It is not up to the judge to decide what cases are sound and what cases are not sound. It is up to the other teams in the debate to do that against the arguments presented by a team. It is not up to a judge to be inserting themselves by rebutting cases. And then finally, you want to make sure you're minimizing your own personal bias, because if, for example, you really enjoy running feminist motions or you really dislike principal cases, as a judge, you need to make sure that you're checking yourself and making sure you're not overcrediting feminist cases and being really, really hard on any principal cases just because you may like or dislike them. Another thing is contradictions in debate. So this is when two claims are made in a debate and the second one is physically unable to happen if the first one is also true. So claims which are made which are contradictory are not credited insofar as if a claim has been made which directly contradicts a claim that has been made before it, the second claim is discarded from the debate. Teams are not actively penalized for contradictions. However, a judge must simply pretend that the second claim was not made. And on the flip side of that, opposing teams should not be credited for a team making a contradiction unless they can point out and prove why that makes the entire premise of a team unconvincing. There are two exceptions to the contradiction rule. One is where it is clear that a speaker has simply misspoke and they did not mean to contradict. They've just accidentally said something wrong and it sounds contradictory. You can use your judgment usually to tell if it was an accidental contradiction, and that's okay as long as what they're actually trying to say is still in agreement with the first claim. The second reason for maybe not discarding a contradictory claim is if the second claim has been accepted by all of the debate so far as if you pretend the second debate did not happen or the second claim did not happen, then if the rest of the debate falls because it is all now irrelevant, then you should not be using the contradictory rule by discrediting the second one, if that physically means that every other team or every other speech after that contradictory claim has to be thrown out. This will usually never happen, but if it does, it is important to know that if an entire debate accepts the second contradictory claim to be the true and correct one, then it is okay to continue to have that claim as standing in the debate. Finally, a last rule is the average intelligent voter does understand the rules of British parliamentary debate. Therefore, they know what to do when rule violations happen. So if any new arguments are given in whip, the same as what happens with a second contradictory claim, is that judges must simply pretend that the argument was never made in whip. It was silence for the time that that new argument was being developed. Teams are not actively penalised for contradictions or making new arguments in whip, but they are penalised for actively harming a debate, for example, by providing an unfair definition or squirreling the motion in such a way that actively harms the rest of the teams. If equity violations do occur during a debate, that is also not really factored into judging, insofar as teams are not actively penalised by the equity violations they make during a round. If you are a chair judge, of course, you should follow the specific equity policy of the competition you're attending in what to do if an equity violation does occur. But when you are thinking about judging, it does not factor in terms of penalising the team. However, the averagely intelligent voter does generally find cases that are based on equity violations unconvincing. So the second section to this video is the judging process itself. So judging in British parliamentary debate is largely seen as holistic adjudications. So this is when everything that the team has done and has contributed to the debate is taken into account. So you need to ensure when you're judging British parliamentary debates that you're being as comparative as possible. There is no such thing in a debate as an automatic first or an automatic fourth, so you need to make sure that nothing that a team says you are crediting as being unbeatable, or you are crediting as causing them to completely fail in the debate. There is always the chance for a team to be better or worse than another team, so they cannot be either credited as winning or credited as losing before the debate is finished. When you are judging, it's really important to make sure you are judging through identifying the main points of clash, the main points of contention between teams, and then using who won all of those disagreements and all of those clash points into who actually wins out on all of the comparatives, instead of doing things like counting arguments, giving teams credit for style or the time spent on all of their cases, or things like that. So you need to be ensuring that you're judging based on the points of clash, based on the cases that they run, the responses that they give, and also the engagement they give between teams as well. No cases in British parliamentary debate are taken in a vacuum. They are always taken in context of the team you are comparing them to. So you always need to be looking out for rebuttal that's being given, any responses that are being given. Also POIs as well are very important in terms of engagement. So you want to be making sure as a judge you are tracking those and you're giving them credit where credit is due. Sometimes it is necessary as a judge to weigh cases if teams don't just disagree on what is true in a debate. If they also disagree what is relevant, then it is up to a judge to decide what is the relevant case that will be winning based on two teams. So the way a judge decides what is relevant is you will need to think about what teams agree is true and important, what teams are implicitly agreeing that is true and important, and then also what each team has successfully proven to be important in the debate, and then using those to decide what is relevant in the debate and what is to be credited. If these end up failing, it's always just important to think about what the average intelligent voter takes to be important, and then using that to weigh up each of the teams if there is this dispute on relevancy. The third section we're going to be looking at is note-taking. So this is incredibly personal to the judge. If you find 5 different judges and ask them to tell you how they take their notes, you will usually get 5 different answers. And this is just because taking notes is very individual. So you need to find what works best for you. This can take some trial and error, but you will find that when you are taking notes, there are some things you will always need to write down and some things you are okay just remembering. But it's incredibly important when you're taking notes during a debate that you're writing them in a very clear way that is easy to navigate for you. So you want to make sure that you have down all of the important information from the teams, so all of that important analysis, the nuances in their impacts and their weighing and conclusions, but you don't want to be transcribing the whole speech, because that's going to make it very difficult to flick through during the panel discussion and during the oral adjudication when you're trying to find the point you want to talk about. You also want to be making sure that they're structured in a way that makes them very easy when you're doing your comparisons between teams. Usually it's helpful to have your raw notes on sheets of paper. What I like to do is have a sheet of paper per team. I will then split that piece of paper in half, so I'll have each speech from the two speakers on one piece of paper, and I'm able to quickly look and compare their case as a whole to the other sheets of paper with the other teams, and have the raw notes. But then also what I find useful is creating a master sheet, which I split into quarters, and I will have the bottom line of all of the arguments from teams. I'll have any key responses and key rebuttal they give, and any of my own notes on weighings or conclusions I've come to through the debate on one piece of paper. That is usually the only piece of paper I will look at during justifications and during the panel discussion and the oral adjudication, just so it's right there in front of me and I don't need to spend a minute flicking through pieces of paper to find what I need. This can take a little while to get right, so just working through note-taking, trying some different styles, you'll find what works for you quite quickly. So moving into section 4 is the panel discussion. So this is what happens when the debate is finished and all of the speakers have been sent out. Judges, as a panel, will have 15 minutes to complete the discussion and get their ballots submitted. Now, this is not a lot of time, and this time includes the actual deliberation of discussing what the call is, assigning the speaker scores, and also submitting the ballot. So you need to be making sure, if you're the chair who is leading the discussion, or if you're one of the panelists, you're making the most efficient use of your time so you can get everything done within the 15 minutes and not annoy the CA team who are trying to keep everything to schedule. Yeah, if you are the chair, you want to be making sure that you're conducting the discussion in an orderly way and that your ballot is submitted on time, because if the CA team knows that you are the room that has held up the competition because you've spent too long in the panel discussion, they might not be very favourable to you when they're doing things like assigning the chairs for the next round and deciding which judges break and judge the out rounds. So it's in your best interest to be making sure that the discussion goes smoothly and is completed within the time limit. The actual discussion itself is led by the chair. So during this discussion, the chair should allow a short time at the beginning, maybe a minute or two, for all of the judges to go over and consider their notes that they've made for the debate and form their initial call. So this initial call is just the initial reading of the debate that each individual judge has had, and what they would put as first, second, third, and fourth. The chair will allow each panelist to share their initial call with everyone else before sharing their own, and then from there, the chair will look at where the disagreements lie within the calls, and will then guide a discussion about what is the objectively correct call for that debate. The initial call that you have made, you do not need to stick to. In fact, it is very likely that you are going to change your initial call based on what the other panelists are talking about, because you may have missed something. Of course, 8-7 minute speeches is quite a long time, so you may accidentally zone out, you may miss or misinterpret something. So you want to be making sure that you're listening to the other panelists, because they may have a different reading, and then as a group deciding what is best. The panel discussion is not a debate in and of itself. You are not proving why what your initial call is right. Instead, you are, as a group, deciding what the collective correct call is. If after the discussion happens, a consensus is called, fantastic. But sometimes there is not a consensus that has been reached within the time. Usually at about 10 or 12 minutes, the chair might be thinking about calling a vote because they need to leave enough time to complete the ballot. So if at maybe 10 or 12 minutes there is still not a consensus, the chair will call a vote where all the wings and the chair will then vote on where the disagreements are and then come up with the final call. And whether the final call is decided by consensus or decided by a vote, the ballot must be completed within 15 minutes, including speaker points. So speaker points are given to each of the speakers based on how their individual speeches went. This is where it differs slightly from the rest of British parliamentary debating, where we take the team as a team and we do not separate what comes from each speaker. The speaker scores are given on an individual basis based on how their speech went. The speaker scale is what we use to assign these speaks. It is a scale that goes from 50 to 100 with brackets of numbers which describe each of the speeches. For example, here I have the bracket for 73 to 75, which is arguments are almost exclusively relevant, although may fail to address one or more core issues sufficiently. Arguments are logical, but tend to be simplistic and vulnerable to competent responses, and clear enough to follow and thus credit. So, because we are judging in a holistic way, a speech does not need to meet all the criteria to fall within a bracket. It just needs to be the best approximation to explain how a speech went to fall into that bracket. Of course, British parliamentary debating rules means that style is not credited in and of itself, but style matters when assigning speaker points to the extent that the average intelligent voter is persuaded better by speeches which have a better style. So if the content of the speech puts it in a certain bracket, it may be then the style which indicates whether it comes on a specific score within that bracket. It's also incredibly important to note that the whole range of the scale should be used. It does exist from 50 to 100 for a reason. Some judges tend to only want to stick between maybe 65 and 80. There will be speeches that happen which go above 80, and there will be speeches that happen that fall below 65. So what I would recommend is when you are assigning speaker points, have the scale out in front of you so you can actually think, okay, this is the bracket I'm thinking of putting it in. Does it actually lie there, or should it be higher or lower? The final section we're going to be looking at in this video is oral adjudications. So oral adjudications are given by the chair, and they must take less than 15 minutes. This is incredibly important, just like the panel discussion, that these run to time, so there are not delays in a competition. The chair is usually the judge who will give the OA, unless they call a vote and end up in the minority of a vote for a call. In this case, usually a panelist who is in the majority for that call will be the person who gives the OA. They can follow different structures depending on the style and the personal preferences of whoever's giving the OA, but generally they follow a three-step structure. They start by giving some general feedback. They talk about maybe the quality of the debate. They talk about if the call was particularly close in any areas, and they'll also give general feedback that every speaker or every team in the debate could find useful. They will then move on to the call, so they will declare where each team placed. They will also say if there are any contentions, so if a call had to be called, and if a vote had to be declared for the call to happen, what was the results of that split, and they would then declare that as well. And then finally, they go into a justification for the call. So the justification can happen in a few different ways, but usually a chronological justification is best, as it is easiest for all of the speakers to follow. Therefore, they will get the most out of the oral adjudication. So what you want to be doing when you're giving your justification for the call is walking all the teams through each of the 6 comparatives. You want to be talking about opening government, you want to bring in opening opposition and talk about who won that comparative, then you want to bring in closing government and talk about how closing government engaged with their opening and with opening opposition and where they fell between those 2 teams, and then finally bring in closing opposition and how they engaged with the 3 teams in the debate. So the OA should be clear and concise. Of course, they have to remain within that 15 minutes time limit, but they should also address all of the points that have been flagged by each team. So if there are any cases that a team has spent a lot of time on, but hasn't really been used very much during the panel discussion or as a justification, you still want to mention that if a team has spent time on it, so the team does not think you have forgotten about that case. Also, if any material is important to the justification that wasn't explicitly flagged by a team, you also want to discuss that, because they may not have realized they've made a case that has been so useful within the discussion and within placing where their team went. So it's important to let them know that that's happened and why the call has fell the way it has, based on any non-explicitly flagged material. Finally, some personal feedback can be given during the OA, so you can talk about if there are any specific things that a team or a speaker can do to do better next time. You can talk about that within the OA, but ensure you keep it brief so you have enough time to talk about all of the different comparatives and all of the different justifications and reasoning for your call. You want to ensure that this is as clear as possible, as a lot of, especially novice speakers, may find it quite difficult to follow a debate as it's happening. So being able to explain why the call has happened the way it has, what the judges were specifically looking for and specifically crediting, is incredibly important in the development of speakers. So it's important when you're giving an OA as a judge that you're giving in a way that speakers can most benefit from. So with that, that brings us to the end of this video on British parliamentary debating. I hope it has helped in running us through the basics of judging British parliamentary debate, and I wish everyone the best of luck in the upcoming Bugwell competition.